Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Lost Voice radio program, where we seek to rediscover the lost voice that once spoke to Socrates. This is your host, Jacob Nelson, along with, well, a random guy I found on the street. He was missing last week, but ladies and gentlemen, he's back. And better than ever, John Studi.
Hello. Why, thank you, Jake. What? Hello. Hi. I was going to jump in there all enthusiastic, but then you said hello, and it almost derailed me.
I didn't want to be rude.
Did you get derailed in reference to my horrible joke? Did we finish that?
No, we didn't.
Because I honestly, okay.
We should probably do a recap and finish it up there of the conductor story.
Right. Yeah, so my life has been insane, and I don't even know what's happened or how long it's been since I basically did anything, to tell you the truth. So last week, what happened?
Well, last week you said you were going to call in and then never did, so you kind of left me.
I don't remember why.
I
think I fell asleep. I'm sorry.
You are the worst.
Awful.
You really
I am the worst. But no, our drain, or the main line out to the sewer broke, and our basement didn't flood, but there was definitely quite a bit of backup, and then we had to deal with that. Now and there was like demon blood coming out of our sinks and stuff. It was horrible. Yeah, I know, right? It's actually black silt of some sort, which is disgusting. I'd almost rather have demon blood, minus the whole, like, I don't know, demon thing. But the issue, but now we're at the point where, like, yeah, we cleared up all those drains, so we can do laundry, we can flush our toilets, we can use our sink again, we can use our dishwasher, which is just great. Problem is, our shower doesn't work for some reason, and no matter what we do, I can't seem to get it unclogged. I've snaked it. We have put some incredibly powerful drain cleaners down the toilet, down the bathtub. In fact, there's one that was really interesting. It's I'm not going to mention the name of it, but it's a drain cleaner that's actually an enzyme, and it sinks in the water and it grabs onto the obstruction. And usually, because it's a shower, it's going to be things like hair and grease and or whatever else it might be. Usually, probably just hair, and it's supposed to actually eat it. So it consumes it, and then it gets flushed out with hot water at the end of a night. I thought that was great because it's an eco-friendly thing. The toxicity is fairly low. What?
It destroyed your pipes, though.
It didn't do anything to my pipes. It didn't do anything to the blockage. Nothing's working. So, unfortunately, I think I have to call a plumber because I don't want to mess around with the iron pipes downstairs to try to figure out what the heck's going on. Because I'm not entirely sure if I can adequately put it back together, and if I destroy that, my wife will destroy me. So I prefer to be intact and have my bodily integrity protected. So there's that. But I don't know. Besides, it's like there was something that happened with my kids. Can't say it on the radio. I'll tell you later, Jake. That was just absolutely insane. That was a huge, kind of a huge panic moment for us. I don't know, having 3 kids and not having a regulated schedule is really throwing off my sense of time. One day blends into the next more than I thought it would. So I'm actually really glad for my classes and that I actually have assignments that are due on different days, so I have to stay on top of things.
Right.
Although I am sad, Jake, that you and I didn't end up in the same ethics class.
I am too. I'll tell you more of that stuff later.
Okay, well.
Probably shouldn't tell you what a class on the radio.
Well, I'll tell you about my class. But it's only because I have mostly good things to say about them. One, there are a couple of students in there who with whom I've had like some sort of affinity, even though I've only had him in 1 or 2 classes since I started at Holy Apostles. And second, almost all of the students in my class have at least another master's, if not a doctorate, in a field similar to philosophy. It's insane. And so I'm sitting here looking at all the people who are, all their qualifications and whatnot, and I'm thinking, holy cow, these guys are going to blow me out of the water. But actually it's been a really, really helpful, or what's the word I'm looking for? Not inspiring. Edifying experience, because they're all pushing me. As far as I've been pushed so far by the students and Holy Apostles, I'm loving it. So, even found a guy who wants to contribute to the Fourth Way project I've been putting together.
Oh, nice.
Which eventually I'll do something about that. Anyway, so I've been liking it. I am sad you're not in there, though.
What did you say?
Said I am sad that you're not in there, though. What is this, the second time we've had the same class during a semester, but we've been in different sections?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The university against the students.
It is. Well, maybe we'll have to do our doctorates at University of South Africa together. But then we'll be in different programs, though.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
Do you really want a doctorate, Jake?
I don't know.
I know, right?
Do you?
Well, I like the idea that having a doctorate could actually open up the field of academia to me for getting hired. But at the same time, I think
kind of doctorate though from certain sources.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have too very high ambitions beyond teaching at a community college. So, so there's that, and then also there'd be the possibility of teaching at Holy Apostles as well. But again, that'd be up to the administration. But the thing about the master's degree that appeals to me is that instead of being called doctor, which is great, I love that title, I can make people call me master.
I feel like master is more edifying than doctor.
It is, because then you get people confused. When you introduce yourself as Dr. Studi or Dr. Nelson, they think that you've actually acquired something useful in medical studies. But the reality is that you simply have a degree in philosophy or theology, which is really of no use to anybody in an emergency.
Right. I mean, I guess you could help them contemplate the meaning of their existence as they're dying.
I could.
So there's that.
In fact, I've thought about that before, except I would take a total, like Jean-Paul Sartre look at things and, like, your life is meaningless, it's absurdity, hell is other people, that sort of thing. Was it Sartre that said that? Shoot, who was that Sartre? Okay.
I don't know.
Hell is, I'm going to Google it. Hell is other people.
Thomas Aquinas once said, it doesn't so much matter who said what, so long as what was said is true.
And
I love quoting Thomas on that.
I like quoting Thomas on that too, because it actually helps me. One of the things that drives me nuts with doing academic philosophy, especially in the discussion forums on Holy Apostles, is like Aquinas, for instance. I know him well enough that I could sit there and move around and find all the citations that I'm looking for. But it's like, I know what I'm saying. I don't want to take the time to to go through the whole rigmarole of putting together formatting and find exactly where it is and which version is best, or things with like Hume, or those authors I'm not as familiar with, like Kant. I feel like I'm fairly familiar with Kant, but not like chapter and verse like I could with the Bible or St. Thomas. And so I don't want to like go through all of his prolegomena to metaphysics or Descartes' or meditations and narrow it down as fourth meditation, section 5 or whatever is what I'm looking for. I just want what matters is this is true.
I'm attracted to the practical science side of philosophy and theology, because to be on the theoretical side or the speculative side, you really need to know a lot of these authors inside and out, and I just don't have the patience or desire for that.
Yeah, which incidentally is why I do have the patience or desire for that. I like doing that kind of stuff, which is odd because I don't usually have the patience or desire for much. What? Huh?
I thought you just said you don't like doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I like knowing where it is. I just don't like typing it.
That's fine.
It's a matter of doing the work. That's why I typically like conversations, and so like I want to know where stuff is at, but I don't want to end up doing all my citations at the end. I don't know. I'm a walking contradiction. I'm horrible.
You are.
So
I mean, you have we have form but no matter, or matter and no form. I don't remember all the insanity we've gone through.
Huh?
It's one of those two, but certainly not both.
Okay, fine. I don't know. I'm actually thinking, like, after I'm done with my studies at Holy Apostles, in the master's program, I might embark on an intense study of the moderns, which I know makes you cringe.
Yeah, it really does. The moderns are awful.
They are,
but the modern that I actually kind of enjoy would be Descartes, and prior to him would be William of Ockham.
Why William of Ockham?
Well, he in part kicked off all the insanity of the modern and contemporary garbage, but William of Ockham, I think, actually has a lot of value on the practical side of things. So he was terrible with theoretical philosophy and theology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and for those that don't know, the really basic notion of William of Ockham is Occam's razor. The simplest solution is often the best, which is great for day-to-day things in practice and just getting through the day, simplifying your life. William of Ockham and Occam's razor is, I find, to be very helpful when it comes to figuring out problems and things like that. But when it comes to the study of God and human existence, it cuts off a lot of truth.
It does. Especially because I think Occam's razor gets misapplied sometimes. Thinking that the simplest option is best can make you mistake simplest for most comprehensive.
Right.
And so if one theory doesn't explain all the facts, even if that theory is more simple, then it still needs to be revised in order to fit all the data.
The other thing that I like about William and Descartes is that they really were actually good-natured individuals authentically seeking the truth and to make the faith more accessible. Whereas people that came after people that came after Descartes and used Descartes as a springboard, I don't think were as well-intentioned.
Right.
And so then I just get frustrated.
And that was something that was really impressed upon me during my time with Dr. Colton's modern and contemporary courses. That when I was reading through Descartes, every page was just saturated with this deep affection for God. It was incredible. I loved it. It was almost like spiritual reading because of how much he adored the Lord. And that was a question that I had for my professor, because I wasn't as familiar with Descartes as I wish I would have been at the time. I asked him, is he being sacrosanct here? Is he just kind of mocking the faith because so many of his conclusions, granted what he's doing is more methodological, assuming the most skeptical point of view to disprove skepticism, than it is actually his own position. But still, so much of what he did is damaging to the faith. That I was thinking, like, how is this guy actually pious? But then my professor assured me, no, this guy really, he was a daily communicant. He loved going to mass. He frequent partaker in the sacrament of reconciliation, all that sort of thing.
Right.
So he loved God, and that's one of the things
really did. And the whole point of for Descartes, because he was a mathematician by trade.
Yep.
Was in some sense to basically, I think, formulate an early idea of Boolean logic, to mathematize things that you really can't, but to put the faith in some way where your average person can kind of formulaically assent and remove the doubts they have. And that's a well-intentioned project to try and disseminate the faith and remove doubt from the faithful, or remove doubt from those considering the faith, or remove doubt from those who you're seeking to evangelize. Unfortunately, he was a great mathematician and a very poor philosopher, and that's never a recipe for success.
Yeah. It isn't.
Another recipe for disaster, if you'll allow me.
Transition. Are you transitioning right now, Jake?
That's a loaded question nowadays. I'm not on any social media because I don't believe in social media. I think it destroys culture and individuals. Except
how can
LinkedIn.
Something that you don't believe in destroy cultural, or if it doesn't exist, destroy culture as individuals?
Anyway,
I'm equivocating because I'm not. That was a horrible joke. I apologize.
It really was.
I will self-flagellate later. That one's even more appropriate than your
Never mind. You're terrible. But I am on LinkedIn, and I frequently post things for the Lost Voice radio program and try and make connections to increase our footprint out there, which is great. But with all the stuff going on in the church, I've had some opportunities to challenge some erroneous thinking. One guy, he posted this video that was just several videos put together of Archbishop Vigano greeting Pope Francis kindly and being at the some gala in honor of ex-Cardinal McCarrick. And his caption was like, "So this undercuts Vigano's testimony." It's like, I just wrote back and said, or he said something how it proves that Benedict never sanctioned McCarrick, and I just said, where in this proves that? He never responded. But I got into a fight on LinkedIn, and things like this will probably make you want me to get on Facebook again after a 12-year hiatus. But somebody posted a meme of a priest in a cassock walking, and it said, "Married priests are not the answer." Now, there is this priest of the Orthodox faith. He's an oblate of St. Benedict, and he's in Nebraska. And I got into a fight with him, starting off with this man named Mark Wilson, who correctly points out that pedophilia is less than 3% of the abuse cases in the church. He says the problem has to do with homosexual priests and post-pubescent boys, which accounts for, he says, 86% of the cases. The John Jay report from 2002, I don't know if it was quite as high as 86, but it was in that mid-80 range. And he goes on to say the communists, and I would augment his next one. He says homosexuals, but it's predatory homosexuals, infiltrated the U.S. church. Many years ago, it was a plan, and this is actually very well documented. There have been books written on it. There was a high-level KGB officer who came out after a conversion, came out and said that she was personally responsible for 1,200 communists who had become priests. And in the mid to late 50s, I think, she said they already had 3 communists in the Vatican. So imagine, 60 years later. So I responded and said, "Mark, thank you for this clarification." And I talked about how all abuse is reprehensible and all this stuff. I go on to say that the original point of this, fidelity is the answer, not marriage. To say that marriage solves abuse is both asinine and offensive to all of those people within marriage who suffer from abuse.
Right.
This actually solved the problem, and there wouldn't be abuse or infidelity within marriages, but there are. So now comes in this Orthodox priest. He says, child abuse among married clergy is minuscule as compared to the Roman clergy, where predators have an easy way to hide behind the cloak. This alone should be proof enough to get rid of the unchristian practice of forced celibacy, which is intrinsically evil. So I decided to have some fun with this. I said, Father, with all due respect, your arguments are invalid as you conflate terms and create straw man arguments. For one, forced celibacy is not a thing. It's a vow. Taken. If a man does not want to be celibate, then he does not need to become a priest in the Roman Rite. Secondly, the well-documented attack plans from the predatory homosexualists and communists don't care about the vow. They care about their mission. They could have 15 spouses and it wouldn't change the mission. Thirdly, your presupposition of celibacy as unchristian goes against Matthew 19:12, when Jesus speaks of people choosing to be a eunuch for the kingdom of God, or St. Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 when he speaks about how it's easier to serve the kingdom of God if one is unmarried. Your assertion is actually the one going against the Gospels and the New Testament. I go on to say, lastly, as a man who works at a parish and is married with a child, I will attest that it would be extremely difficult for married priests to be the norm. The demands on just being an employee and balancing married and family life is tough enough, and I don't even celebrate the sacraments for people. I suggest to you, Father, do not oversimplify this problem. Marriage is not a panacea for infidelity.
Agreed.
Then he goes on and says the argument to abolish something that is unchristian is indeed addressing the issue head on. So he actually completely doesn't address the fact that he's the one proposing an unchristian idea.
Well, where is he citing? Like, how is this an unchristian thing? Is it?
He doesn't cite anything.
Okay, that's what I figured.
He says
more that general spirit of Christianity.
Yeah, he says predators won't get into the priesthood in the first place by hiding under the cloak. Young men will have to be married in order to become pastors. Period. That indeed will solve the problem. Well, that's supposing that, again, marriage solves the problem of infidelity and abuse, which it doesn't. You could have an abusive man in a marriage who then becomes a priest and abuses.
Right, and
it doesn't solve anything.
Well, consider this. There was a recent case here where a bishop groped Ariana Grande, or whatever her name is.
I saw that. And not a Catholic bishop.
No, not a Catholic bishop. He was a
Episcopalian or something.
Yeah, Episcopalian or something like that. Despicapalian. What is it now?
Careful now.
Yeah, he just wrapped her arm around her and kind of like groped or moved over to actually touch her breast, and she tried to pull away, and she pulled him in closer. Yeah. He says that it was never his intention to actually grope her, so we can assume the best out of him. But regardless, I grew up Protestant, and there were many instances of people who were abusing their wives or having adulterous affairs.
Well, and you go on from this, and okay, if marriage is really the panacea for abuse, then how come, depending on which study you look at, as Father Altier talks about in one of his homilies as of late, that between like 4 and 7 or 8 children between 4 and 7 or 8 out of 10 children going to public school get abused over the course of their 12 years. Like, well, those teachers are married. If marriage solved it, then, abuse wouldn't happen. So anyway, I looked into this priest who, he like really talked down to this other guy that I was supporting. First, as my argument, and that of most people is simple logic. Too bad your brain can't comprehend it, as it may be deluded.
Oh my gosh!
So I said, Father, your insulting and condescending approach to rebuking Mr. Wilson is nothing short of shocking, especially for a clergyman. Said this is a classic case of clericalism, where the cleric class looks down upon lay people. Either that, or it's a classic tactic out of Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky, and fit for nothing short of a progressive. Father, you should consider studying authentic pastoral theology and the art of rhetoric by Aristotle. So he says, it's interesting, though somewhat peculiar, to see being lectured during disagreements. This constitutes more of a cop-out than any true argument. It's like, well, this was not part of my argument. This was defending a man who was making valid points, and you just totally spoke against his dignity. I mean, it was sick. But anyway, I bring this up because we're going to talk about relativism today, and this priest is not looking at the facts at all. He's not looking at the John Jay report. He's not looking at the facts that study after study have shown. He's not looking at similar models of solving abuse or other abusive situations. He's just throwing his truth out there, and the more he says it, the more true it must become, because it's the only thing he's saying. And then he creates straw man arguments to support it, and can't see the ridiculous nature of his own argument. So I thought this was a good example of presenting an argument that's valid and true to somebody who just wants to dictate their own truth.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely difficult. C.S. Lewis once remarked that without an agreement, there can be no argument, because in order for you to actually make any progress in any discussion, you have to have some touchstone that both of you agree to.
Sure.
If you and I are arguing about the nature of whether or not homosexual marriage is something that should be supported in our society, then we're going to have to just, first of all, agree on terms. What is homosexual? What is marriage? What is society? What is good? What is beneficial?
Right. Even that whole argument, and if I may take the liberty, is asinine, because if we're going to talk about terminology, then we would have to actually say that by definition, there's no such thing as homosexual marriage, because marriage and matrimony by definition means to make a mother. Yeah. So you just can't look. We can call it what you like, but that the terms don't match. No. Yeah, I really. According to Peter Kreeft in Socratic logic, it's not then a valid argument. Yes, because then you're on terms of equivocation, or at least four-term fallacy. So. Right. Which is just a blast. My favorite is the middle, the excluded middle, but you'll get there later. Didn't you find an error in Peter Kreeft's book? I found a couple, but it's been almost 2 years since I've read it, so I don't remember exactly what it was. There were a couple. One had to do with the nature of teleology, the telos, which is. He said it was like, he described it analogically as the end of a thing is like a magnet that pulls some iron filaments, because of something outside of it towards which it is attracted. And now that's true, but only in a really loose sense, insofar as an acorn or a sapling or whatever, it doesn't have the actuality of a full oak tree. But it has the potential of a full oak tree, which is going to be actualized by the inherent neurative powers within neurative and growth powers within it, and so the form unfolds through the perfection of the matter to obtain the final end. And so it's something that's intrinsically driven rather than extrinsically driven, but we call it it's called an extrinsic cause, because it is in itself outside of the thing in itself. Right. But the final cause either, and if you want to look at it this way too, and that's just looking at it kind of the strict Aristotelian point of view. If we back it up to the Thomistic point of view, then what we can say is that there's an extrinsic cause, but it's an extrinsic cause through the divine ideas, which is an exemplar form of causality, in which the final cause of the sapling is to grow into what God's perfect idea of an oak tree would be, and that oak tree only imitates, even that perfection of the oak tree imitates God's nature in a particular way. So it's a way that God's nature can be expressed in a creature. And so the final cause of an oak tree either exists in reality, but in this case, in the case of a sapling, it doesn't. Or it exists in the mind, and so then we can say that it's in the mind of God, and that's that's God's efficient causality that causes the oak tree to act towards its final end, rather than like some sort of final cause existing in a Platonic realm that's pulling it. But God works in and through the creature's nature in order to bring it towards its final end. Mm-hmm. Sorry. So it was kind of nitpicky, obviously. Yeah. But there were a couple other things here and there too that I didn't quite agree with, that I thought were flat out wrong. I looked into. Oh, this, sorry. Yeah. That's beside the point. This priest, Yeah. And as it turns out, he, where was it here? He is a master in Reiki and Tai Chi. Oh dear. So he's not even aware of the fact that he's serving multiple gods.
Yeah.
So that made more sense to me of what he was arguing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
That does make a lot of sense. Kind of shows you where the loyalties lie, so to speak.
Yep. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to talk about relativism, and I'm sure we've touched on this on a number of occasions throughout our year and a half of this glorious show. But we're going to talk about it a little bit more in light of the seeming church implosion going on. Not that the church is actually imploding, but, kind of feels like it sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's where... So if you guys haven't heard Father Altier's homily Father Robert Altier's homily from, 2 weeks ago now? 3 weeks ago?
He preached this weekend, so... Yeah, it must have been 2 weeks ago.
Okay, 2 weeks ago. Fantastic. Look it up. Look up the...
at Church of St. Raphael in Crystal, Minnesota.
Yep. It's an absolutely wonderful, wonderful homily that addresses a lot of the issues that are going on right now and spoke about some of the things that Jake mentioned at the beginning of the program in his discussion with his priest. But one of the things that I thought that I appreciated in there is he said that when Jesus cleared out the temple, he cleaned as a man would. He moved all the big things out of the way. But now Mary's coming. Mary's coming to clean out. She's going to clean like a woman, and she's not going to leave anything left. Everything's going to be purified. And for me, that was a bit of conviction to really check my own conscience and my own actions. Yeah, and to clean more at home. Which I'm looking at my living room right now, and yep, after the show, I know what I'm doing. And two, that this isn't an implosion in the church; it's a purification. Right, it's a purification that Pope Benedict talked about. What was it, the 1965 Christmas radio address, where he talked about the Church of the Future being a smaller and leaner one.
Yeah.
And I think that's honestly going to end up being the case. And I'm not happy for the sake of those souls who will likely leave the church because of these things, or who will...
But at the same time, a lot of those souls have already left the church, right, in practice.
Yes, in practice. And even those who are there physically on Sundays, right, have left the church in spirit. And with the church being gone in spirit, the difficulty for me there, or it makes me sad, is at least they were there physically, and so that way they had access to the sacraments in some way, shape, or form, and exposure to the goodness, truth, and beauty that can come in through the church. Now, after some more purification or whatever, should the liturgy and should the beauty of the Mass be re-emphasized over and above some of the crazy wackadoodle things that happened in the 60s and what have now or we now have come to these very odd modernist churches. Maybe we'll have some conversions because of the influence of the beauty that is present in the Mass. But we'll see. Nonetheless, it's still going to take time for us to find a way to purify the church.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary is going to do that through intercessions. So speaking of relativism, I think this is a kind of a bugaboo word, which I never thought I'd use that term in my entire life. It's a bugaboo word for a lot of religious people, in that it's a scary thing. Like, there's relativists out there, and they do all these things, and they want to, destroy. They're immoral or whatever, and then, we often assume, or we often just have this vague idea of what relativism is, without giving any proper distinction or understanding why they argue the way they do. And this is something that I find to be extremely important in our discussions, and I think that this priest would benefit quite a bit from this piece of advice right here that St. Thomas Aquinas held to in really exemplary fashion, and that's understanding your opponent's position very well. Because if somebody is, if you're arguing against a case and you don't really know what another person is arguing for, then your argument against them is generally going to be misinformed, or perhaps uncharitable. And I experienced this coming to the church when I became when I was in the process of becoming Catholic, my parents found out about me becoming Catholic by accident, and when they confronted me about it, the first thing I said was that everything I've ever learned about the church up until this point was either a half-truth, a misunderstanding, or a flat-out lie. And to know the church is to love her, because it's the church that Jesus loves, and the church that Jesus ultimately wed himself to. And I think it's in a way that was a lesson for me to make sure that when I oppose something, that I have at least a real understanding of it, not from simply like an apologetic source, Peter Kreeft's great book, Refutation of Moral Relativism, or something along those lines, but rather I want to read about it from the people who actually advocate for this position. And there's an article which has been published in Philosophy Now, which is a magazine, a philosophical magazine, that has been passed around quite a bit as one of the more proper examples, or one of the stronger examples of an argument for moral relativism in a very truncated fashion. And that comes from Professor Jesse Prinz, who is a distinguished professor of philosophy at the City University of New York. He's actually authored a couple of books. And as I was going through this article, I'm saying, yeah, some of the arguments that I've heard from apologists won't work on the surface level, and that his position, Professor Prince's, needs a more thorough addressing. And for us to understand his thought, what I see him advocating for is something called a cultural relativism, and thus the title of his article. Morality is a culturally conditioned response, or morality is a culturally conditioned response, in which Professor Prinz argues that the source of our moral inclinations is simply a cultural artifact. And he goes through several different arguments for this and against the idea of objective morality, which is something I actually appreciate in his point, because a lot of people who, in my experience anyway, who argue for a relativistic worldview will argue against absolutism, in which
there's absolutely no universal.
Yeah.
What
was that?
They would say there's no such thing as a universal.
Right.
Or there's no such thing as absolutes. There's no moral absolutes, which itself is a universal statement against universals.
Yeah, which is very difficult.
Cracks me up every time.
Oh, I love those self-refuting statements.
And they don't even know they're doing it. It's almost sad.
I know. It is sad. There's a lot of sad things that happen.
There really are.
Like, I know. What was I going to say? But this is, again, evidence of the need to talk about terms and actually clarify before you attack. But I like the idea of his distinction objective versus objectivist versus absolutist, because an absolutist would say something like, in every single case, it is wrong to give money. It's right to give money to the poor.
Mm-hmm.
But in an objectivist worldview, you can say it is right for you to give to the poor, but there are certain situations where giving money to a poor person will actually be a wrong action. For instance, that that person is going to use it for drugs, or that that person is going to use it to pay off a hitman to kill the boss who fired them, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And so in those situations, you'd be you'd be materially contributing to the person's evil.
Or if you're doing it as something to assuage yourself.
Yes.
When you could have done something better,
Yes.
I'll give them $10, even though I have a job that I could give them.
Yeah. And so the distinction between absolutist and objectivist is important, because a lot of people who argue for a relativistic case will often say that those who oppose relativism are absolutist rather than objectivist. I'm an objectivist rather than
I do object to you quite frequently.
You should. You absolutely should. I don't blame you for that at all. You were entirely morally justified. In fact, not only morally justified, it is morally praiseworthy for you to do so.
You are an objectionable person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to see how long the awkward silence would go. Well, anyway, so most moral philosophers, incidentally, don't actually buy moral relativism. There's too many responses to even some of the strongest arguments, and ultimately it doesn't really seem to work out terribly well. Mm-hmm. But it is something that we do see rather often at the popular level. Lots of people are relativists. It's what you're taught in school, practically speaking. Right. It's what I remember hearing from some of my kids when I was working in youth ministry. I remember we went out caroling one day, and for Christmas, not just like randomly caroling.
We should randomly carol, Studi.
That'd be kind of fun. I mean, but the one of my students approached one of my other adult leaders and said, "Should we be caroling because like what if they don't really believe in Jesus and we offend them? Like, do we have to sing Jesus songs all the time, or is it that we or can we like do Frosting the Snowman?" I mean, we occasionally did some of those secular Christmas songs too, just for the fun of it. But I'm not a big fan of them either. But one of the things that she said, this girl said in discussion with her, she's like, well, yeah, I believe that Jesus is God and that the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus founded, that's true, but that's just kind of for me. I mean, I can't see the same thing for somebody else. And so she either meant, one of two things, literally what she said, or that she doesn't feel like enforcing her beliefs on other people. Right. In which case, there's a lack of charity there, because if the church is, truly has the cure for the disease of human sin, then we're hateful, spiteful for not, proclaiming that from the rooftops.
I want to come back to this in a minute whenever you're done, but I want to come back to her being afraid of offending somebody.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll just go. You can go for that. You can rebound after that, then I'll hop right into the article here.
Okay. It really speaks to what Bishop Morlino wrote in response to the present crisis in the church. And he said what the church needs right now is more hatred. We need to be a people that actually hates the things of Satan, that hates the things against God, that we don't just simply tolerate them or whatever. We actually need more hatred for these things that are offensive to God. And because of this cultural moral relativism, it's bred a ton of people who are mediocre and who are afraid of offending, because the chief virtue in our culture is tolerance, but tolerance only for leftist propaganda. If it's conservative or if it's right-wing or if it's of any kind of traditional value, then those things are not to be tolerated. Mm-hmm. And so, at the same time where this young lady is worried she may offend by proclaiming the name of Jesus and the truth of the Catholic faith, would she be as wary of offending by singing, say, a pro-homosexual song or a pro-transgender song? Like, would that even cross her mind that might be offensive to somebody? And the answer is no, because we have learned to simply tolerate, and to everybody kind of, you do you, I'll do me, live and let live, all this flowery kind of bull crap. And what's happened is that relativism or personal truth or subjective truth has completely destroyed objective truth in our culture. And the ultimate end of that is we no longer have the vigor of hatred for the things that are offensive to God, and we simply tolerate them. Mm-hmm. If she really hated the things that were against God or against the truth, she wouldn't mind offending somebody if she spoke about Jesus. But because she's been taught to simply tolerate, she's been taught the value of subjective truth or moral relativism, then you have to also be overly mindful of not offending people.
Right, and it's offending the right people. Or not offending the right people, because I could say that her response to somebody who would object to a school singing some sort of song that was pro-homosexual would be that, well, that person doesn't have to listen to it, and that they need to become more tolerant and accepting and understand that there's these kind of people out there, instead of living in fear of them. And so there's often this radical inconsistency with people who have a moralistic relativism as their primary worldview with respect to their ethics. Now, one thing that this author said, Jesse Prince, is that morals vary dramatically across time and space.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of the classical examples of this are the cannibals that exist in in Africa, or in the some of the Asiatic Pacific islands, or in India, where you have burning, where women will throw themselves onto the funeral pyre of their husbands and incinerate themselves and die with them, and they're more or less forced to do these sorts of things. Or child brides who are married at very young ages and don't have a choice in who they love and who they get to marry. And he compares that to what we do here, that our culture has very different moral norms, and that eating somebody would be viewed as disgusting. Binding a woman's foot to the point where it's fractured and deformed would be something that you go to jail for, or using some sort of, even right now, there's certain countries, like if you look at Germany, circumcision was, I don't know if it was actually passed, but it was on the there was a bill to ban circumcision because they saw it as a form of inhumane mutilation. And it's in light of that person, of that child not being able to have the choice to make the decision for themselves. Okay,
sure,
whatever.
Part of the problem with Prince, though, and I'm sure you'll get to it, is that in order for culturally developed morality to be a thing and be considered a good thing, you would have to deny natural law, because it's true that different cultures have a different value system, but part of the reality of objective morality is that it's based on something outside of human nature, or like outside of human power to construct or destruct, because it's only that way that it has authority within our nature. And so if morality is simply based on cultural norms, then morality is forever going to change based on the changing of the culture. But if it's based on something higher than an individual culture, higher than individual persons, then there are things that will be unchanging regardless of space and time and culture. And so to agree with Prince, you have to disagree with the existence of a natural law, which then that brings into account all kinds of other issues that are not taken account for.
Right. One thing that Prince doesn't take account for anywhere in his article, nor have I ever seen this by anybody who advocates for relativism, is something that C.S. Lewis brings up, in both in The Problem of Pain, which was an interesting thing for him to bring up, but also in his book Mere Christianity. In that when there's disagreements across cultures, not Mere Christianity, it's in The Abolition of Man. When there's disagreement, it's more superficial, more surface level. For instance, you look at cannibalism. We here in the West say cannibalism, ew, gross, because we don't want to disrespect our ancestors by consuming their body and destroying the flesh that they once their bodies once informed, or that the souls once informed. Whereas in Africa, they allow for cannibalism because this is a form of respect, of allowing that family member to continue to live on through them. Or flip it, where in Polynesia, you look at the Maori warriors, they would, if you ever watch like a haka dance, a lot of tongues sticking, they're sticking out their tongues a lot. And the reason why they stick out their tongues is to say, I'm going to eat you. And why are they going to eat you? Because you're going to lose all honor and dignity and respect when I do that and turn you into poo. And so what do we see here? We see this underlying value that is consistent through all cultures of respect.
Right.
You won't find a culture that says that disrespecting your elders is a good thing. You're always going to find that children are going to be chastised for doing those sorts of things. You'll never find a
modern
culture
America.
Well, yeah, I suppose now you've got that. All right, we're breaking all the rules here, but I mean, with the exception of Brave Sir Robin from Monty Python, you will not find any culture that will have ballads that are sung to those who run away in battle.
Brave Sir Robin.
Brave. Have you ever heard it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should I play it? Do we have time?
We don't have time right now, and there are parts of that we probably shouldn't play.
What? Where? Oh yeah, you're right. Never mind.
Yeah, at the very end. But I mean, this is a topic very worthwhile to continue talking about and picking up next week. We do have about 10 minutes left, and we need to do a recap of the train conductor story and a wrap-up in about 8 minutes.
Okay, I can do that.
All right.
So, and for those of you who have been paying attention and listening in for the last several weeks,
hey, we're sorry.
We're sorry, and we apologize with everything about our existence, particularly me for this joke.
Also, for our existence, we do apologize.
Even before our existence, the events that led up to our existence, we apologize for, because they in some way caused us to be, and to be the way that we are. Anyway, so to recap, there was a boy who was born with this innate desire to love trains. His parents put him in train onesies, and he was constantly playing with trains when he was a kid. Throughout his high school career and elementary school career, he had built several model trains, all of which, every single time he was involved with trains, something disastrous happened. It was always something bad. Whenever he was running the train, whenever he was conducting some sort of like construction project, or if he was giving rides to his friends, it was awful. And it all culminated in all these disasters culminated in the death of his parents. And at that point, he didn't lose his love for trains, but rather decided to go on to university to become a train engineer, to actually become a conductor. And he barely passed his exams, and he eventually goes on to get his own train, and then he has this flashback to the death of his parents, and it causes some sort of psychotic break with him, and he decides to throw the train down full throttle, and he derails it and kills everybody on board, and of course he himself somehow escapes unscathed. And he is put on trial, and they've determined to execute the guy. And at the first, he's given an opportunity to be executed. I don't know how much of an opportunity that is, to tell the truth. He's put in a situation where he's going to be executed, and he decides to eat just fast food and a 25-cent black Mr. Smucker cigar, which of course this Mr. Smucker cigar has been perfectly handcrafted since the time of King Ojibwe, and is
which is a story for another day.
This tobacco, which I'm gonna have to incorporate that now in my story of King Ojibwe.
Yeah, that was my idea like 6 years ago. I just want to remind you of that.
Oh yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Thank you. I could go to the backstory of King Ojibwe in the middle of the story. That'd be fantastic. Anyway. Oh, no, I'm blending them. Okay. So, moving on.
Yes.
I've got, he's smoking the cigar, fills up the room, everybody kind of feels relaxed and nice, and it's a great, beautiful cigar smoke. They throw the switch, the voltage goes through him, and they turn the switch off, and he's still sitting there smoking his 25-cent black Mr. Smucker cigar with a little bit of a smile on his face. And when they eventually untie his hands, he puffs. He opens up his. He takes the cigar out of his mouth and goes chugga chugga, choo choo, as he blows 2 billows of smoke out of his mouth. through the process of, legal mumbo jumbo and all that jazz, they find out that you can actually execute a guy up to 3 times for the same crime. Forget about double jeopardy. This is in California. The Constitution doesn't matter. So what we do eventually is, or the Bill of Rights. What they do eventually is they put him on trial for the same murder, and it's open and shut case. He walks in, you're guilty, you're executed, and they wait a whole year for this. And this time he orders another extravagant meal, lobster and steak, and he loves all these things, and he says he wants to finish it all off and go out with a bang by ordering a 50-cent Black Mr. Smucker cigar, which is not only something that was bred in a natural sense to be perfect, but it was also genetically altered in order to have some of the best aromatic qualities you can possibly get, especially for a cigar at this price. And it's smooth. It goes down. It goes down and comes up easily. Sure, it can still lead to some issues with cancer, and whether it be in the throat or the mouth. But that's not even the first thing in your mind, because the pleasure that you experience with this is so intense and so incredible that even if you were to go through all the treatments for cancer and radiation, with radiation therapy and whatnot, you'd still find it to be more than worth it to smoke one of these cigars, especially to smoke these cigars over a lifetime of bliss and enjoyment. And so then they hook him up to the chair, and this time they wanted to make sure there was more power involved with this execution, and so they actually hook up the city generator to to this jail, and to the electric chair. And so they throw the switch, the lights go off, everything's flashing in the city, and the power usage in the city spikes dramatically. There's a smell of, even though the lights are dark, there's a smell of burnt hair and clothing, and so they think, well, clearly this guy has been executed, he's dead, and so they flip on the switch, and he's sitting there, and his eyebrows are singed off, he's bald, he's got no body hair, but he's still smoking that 50-cent Black Mr. Smucker cigar. And when they unstrap his arms and everything and say, "Oh, we got to do this one more time. We're going to do it next time."
2 minutes, dude.
Oh no, I can do this. How are we going to do this? He picks out the cigar and says, "Chugga chugga," as he blows off 2 billows of smoke. Finally, another year goes by, and this time he orders even more extravagant meal: sushi, blowfish, calamari. He gets the best steak in the world, and he finally orders a $1 Black Mr. Smucker cigar, which is not only genetically bred or bred through the natural process of plant husbandry or whatever, genetically altered, but it's actually altered down to the molecular level to give you the perfect experience of euphoria that's only possible by activating the dopamine receptors in your brain in a way that's not only conducive to pure bliss and also the serotonin and norepinephrine, but also is something that strengthens and harmonizes the whole brain. It's incredible, and it cannot cause cancer, but rather prevents it. So he smokes a cigar. Everybody in the jail cell benefits from it. They hook him up to the thing. This time they hook him up to a nuclear power generator, which is 2 kilometers away. They make a special line for this. They throw the switch.
5 seconds.
All the lights go off, and then they flip it back on. He's sitting, and they think he's dead, but he's sitting there completely naked. And they say, "What in the world is going on here?" And after they unstrap him, he takes out the cigar, says, "Chugga chugga, true true." 2 billows of smoke go up, and he says, "Well, you guys should have looked at my record. I've never been a very good conductor."
Bah.
Bah!
And this story proves there's really no point for us to have a radio show. But we do appreciate all of you listeners out there who faithfully tune in each week, whether or not we have a show or a rerun or whatever kind of craziness is going on. We sure appreciate you tuning in over the last year and a half, and go ahead and, if you dare, spread the word about the Lost Voice radio program, in part for the camaraderie, the fun, but also to rediscover the lost voice of wisdom. You said something, Studi?
Yeah, you said the camaraderie, the fun. And then I said the pun.
And the pun, yeah. That too. We are punny here. It's fantastic.
I'm not going to go to more jokes because we have like 3 seconds left. If you have any concerns, questions, or comments, go ahead and email us at thelostvoice@wcatradio.com. One more time.
Mostly concerns.
At wcatradio.com. What?
Yeah. Said mostly concerns.
Mostly concerns. I'm concerned. I'm probably going to email us. God bless my faithful listening audience.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.